Chapter 10, Wage Determination. Labor is the most important of the resources used by firms. Labor demand is a derived demand. That is, the demand for a resource that results from the demand for the product it helps produce. Therefore, labor demand depends on the productivity of labor as well as the price of the good or service it helps produce. Let's define two important concepts. Marginal revenue product of labor, denoted MRP, is the change in a firm's total revenue when it employs one more unit of labor. Marginal revenue product is equal to the ratio of the change in total revenue to the unit change in labor. Marginal resource cost of labor, denoted MRC, is the change in a firm's total cost when it employs one more unit of labor. Marginal resource cost is equal to the ratio of the change in total cost to the unit change in labor. In a competitive labor market, marginal resource cost of labor is equal to market wage rate. Because in a competitive labor market, marginal resource cost of labor is equal to market wage rate, the MRP equals MRC rule can be written as MRP equals wage rate. The MRP schedule constitutes the firm's demand for labor because each point on this schedule, or curve, indicates the quantity of labor units that the firm would hire at each possible wage rate. The market demand for labor is the horizontal summation of all of the individual firm demand curves for labor. The labor demand curve can shift due to three main factors. First is changes in product demand. Higher product demand, higher labor demand. Second is changes in productivity. Higher productivity of labor, higher labor demand. Productivity itself depends on the quantity of other resources, technological advance, and quality of labor. The third factor is changes in the prices of other resources. A decline in price of complementary resources increases labor demand, while a change in price of substitute resources has an ambiguous effect on labor demand. Elasticity of labor demand is a measure of the responsiveness of employers to a change in the wage rate. It is also called wage elasticity of demand. It is equal to the ratio of the percentage change in labor quantity to the percentage change in the wage rate. If elasticity is less than 1, labor demand is inelastic. If elasticity is greater than 1, labor demand is elastic. If elasticity is exactly equal to 1, labor demand is unit elastic. Wage elasticity of demand depends on ease of resource substitutability. The greater the substitutability, the more elastic is the labor demand. Elasticity of product demand. The greater the elasticity of product demand, the greater the elasticity of labor demand. Ratio of labor cost to total cost. The larger the share of labor in total cost, the greater the elasticity of labor demand. The supply curve for each type of labor slopes upward, indicating that firms must pay a higher wage rate in order to attract workers away from the alternative job opportunities available to them and workers not in the labor force. The intersection of labor supply and labor demand determines the equilibrium wage rate and level of employment in a given labor market. Competitive labor market is characterized by the many employers that compete for a specific type of labor and the many workers with identical skills that supply that type of labor. Individual employers are therefore wage takers. That is, an individual firm's labor supply is perfectly elastic at the market wage rate. Firms use the MRP equals MRC rule to determine employment at market wage. Graphically, on a competitive labor market, wage is determined by the intersection of market supply and market demand. Each individual firm decides, given its individual labor demand curve, how many workers to hire at a going market wage, using the MRP equals MRC rule. A monopsony is a market structure in which there is only a single buyer of a good, service, or resource. In labor market monopsony, the single employer is a wage maker. A monopsonist's labor supply curve is the same as the market labor supply curve and is upward sloping. The marginal resource cost curve lies above the labor supply curve, and marginal resource cost exceeds the wage rate. A monopsonist will use the MRP equals MRC rule to determine the quantity of labor to hire and the pay wage corresponding to this quantity supplied. Graphically, for a monopsonist, labor supply is upward sloping, and the marginal resource cost curve lies above the supply curve. The marginal revenue product curve intersects the marginal resource cost curve at a quantity of labor below the quantity that would be hired on a competitive labor market. At this lower quantity, the wage will also be lower than in a competitive labor market. In some labor markets, workers sell their labor services collectively through labor unions. Unions work to raise wage rates for their members. There are two main types of unions. Exclusive, craft unions restrict the supply of skilled labor to increase the wage rate received by union members, while inclusive, industrial unions include all workers in an industry as members and put great pressure on firms to agree to their wage demands through the threat of a strike. Graphically, a craft union model can be represented as a decrease in the supply of labor available in the industry. Such decline in supply results in lower quantity of labor employed and higher wages. An industrial union model, on the other hand, may be represented by a wage floor. The union would negotiate the wage to be at least at the WU level. At this level of wage, demand for labor is at point B, while supply of labor is at point E. That is, there is an excess supply of labor in the industry. Like with a craft union, the result is lower quantity employed and a higher wage than in a competitive labor market. In practice, workers and groups of workers are not all paid the same. Wage differentials are the differences between the wages of different groups of workers. Wage differentials can arise either on the demand or the supply side of labor markets. A weak labor demand will result in a low equilibrium wage, but a strong labor demand will result in a high equilibrium wage. A low labor supply will result in a high equilibrium wage, while a higher labor supply results in a low equilibrium wage. Members of non-competing groups differ in their mental and physical abilities, and in their level of education and training, and therefore receive different compensation.